Hello guys, my name is Tola Elemo. Just call me Tola, Timo. So I'd like to welcome you again to my channel Tmoedevs, where we delve into IT, tech, web development and so many other features as time evolves. But for now we're starting with JavaScript. And we started a couple days back where I had an introduction into the session, and there I introduced two major tools we'll be using: our Visual Studio Code and our Google Chrome. And in that first training session I was able to create a simple web page with just hello world typed on the web page and hello world typed in this console. I noticed in that first class there was a little typo while typing hello world in my h1 header tag. I just put word, there was no L, so we should have WRLD. So I just correct that and reload on the page. But that in no way had any effect on the technicality of the language we're learning or the tools that were introduced. So going ahead today, like I mentioned at the end of that session, that we're going to look at data types in JavaScript and variables today. So in the console tag, I will just introduce that very briskly. I'll be making use of a comment line. The syntax, the code, or the symbol for the syntax of comment line is 2 forward slashes in a JavaScript. Or if it's a multi-line comment, we could just have an opening and with a forward slash and an asterisk, and then closing it we have an asterisk and a forward slash. So within that space we could have our comments. Starting here, I'm just going to list out the variables we have for holding different data types. I'm just going to list out the different data types we have. So we have number, we have string, which we're going to look at, which are different data types. We have boolean, we have empty values. I'm going to look at about 2 types of empty values, and then lastly, in this particular class on variables and data types, we'll look at objects. Okay. There's another particular data type symbol, but I'm not going to talk so much on it in this session. So in the comment line now, I've listed some of the data types we will look at. So I'm just going to start with the number. Okay, so the concept of data types and variables is a generic concept to almost all programming languages and even scripting languages, because it's the concept the computer uses to allocate different kinds of data into different kind of storage spaces. So the data type is referring to the data, which could be a number, a string, a character, whereas the variable is referring to the concept of creating a particular space within memory to hold these data types. So different programming languages have different ways of declaring or defining these variables to hold data, and depending on how they do that, the programming language or scripting language could be categorized as strongly typed or loosely typed. In a strongly typed programming language, the specific data type the variable will hold will be defined from the beginning when it's being defined, and it can't change from holding that kind of data type, or otherwise if you assign a different kind of data type to cause an error. While in loosely typed, of which JavaScript is, the data put in the variable determines the type of the variable. So to cut all the long story, we're just gonna look at how we define variables in JavaScript. We use the following keywords. So I'm just gonna say use the let keyword to define variables in JavaScript. So I'm gonna create a simple number variable now named num. So I'm gonna say let num equals 10. So I've created a simple num variable, and in otherwise what I've done here is I've created a space in memory named num to hold the value 10. So in the advent I do a console log num. I save it and I reload. In my JavaScript training, I go to the developers tool window, console, from inspect I select console. I could see by doing console log num, I could see the value 10, which is what is in the num variable displayed. So that is a simple number variable in JavaScript. Likewise, the num could also hold decimal values. I could say let num2 equals 12.5, and if I do my console.log num2 end the expression, save it, and if I reload here, I could see for num2 the value 12.5 was displayed. So basically we use we store integer values, decimal values in decimal kind of variable types in JavaScript. So this particular kind of numbers, in number kind of variable variables, this kind of data is referred to as number data in JavaScript. So for the next one, data type we're going to look at, string. Now string data types are special data types for holding an array of characters, and what defines them is the quotes. It could be a double quote or a single quote. So here the first one, I'm gonna label this number data type, and then next we're gonna look at string data type. Okay, so the same syntax we use to define all kinds of variables, we use a let keyword. So we say let, and here I could just say it could be any name you use to name your variable. In the convention for naming variables is it must always start with an alphabet. It shouldn't start with a number, but any other a character in between could be a number, and some particular symbols are allowed. And also conventionally we use small caps for variables, while we use larger caps for constants, which we will see as we progress. So I'm just going to name my variable type to hold strings. I'm going to name it first name, first, And the equal to in JavaScript is an assigned statement. The conventional equal to, from the mathematics, which we will see when we get to operators, is a double equal to. That you put the equal to twice, but here we just put it once for assigning that value into the variable. And like I said, for the string data type, we use quotes. It could be a single quote or double quote. So I'm going to use a single quote to define the particular string data type. And here I'm just going to put my full name, Ulutola, as my full first name. And we're going to look at close the statement with the semicolon, and then I'm going to create another string type for my surname, call it last name. My surname is Elemo, yeah, and I end the statement. So by so doing, I've created string variables named first name and last name, and the hold my personal names. So we're just gonna display that on the console. Say console.log first name end it, and then we also have console.log last name. And then we save our work, and then we could reload the page to see the effect on the console. And we could see when I console log first name, Olutola was the result, and I console log last name, Elemo was the result. These are the data types stored in the first name variable and the last name variable. So that is string data types in JavaScript. So I'm just going to scroll down a bit, get more space to focus on the main syntax we're looking at. And next, I'm going to look at Boolean data type. So for the Boolean data types, and sometimes in some scenarios we need a kind of data that it just gives us two options, either 0 or 1, true or false, this or that, here or there. We just need some kind of particular data types to select between two options, and these are the Boolean type of data types, which are basically made up of true and false. So same way we could have let value equals, and we just type it just true. You can see it's highlighted in blue because it's a particular known data type in JavaScript. Or if I say let opposite, I just use OOP value. I use a kind of camel casing here, and I call that false. So you see the true false are already known. Those are just the two values that make up our Boolean data type. So if I say console.log value and with a semicolon console.log opposite for just the opp value. Save our work, reload our page. You could see true false written out there. I could actually do something here using a kind of unary operator, which is a negative value, and putting an exclamation mark in each of these, which is saying show me the opposite values. And I save it and I reload, you see we have the opposing values for this boolean. So if it's not true, it's definitely false. The exclamation mark I introduced here, it's a unary operator simply saying show the opposite of this value. And for boolean values, there are only two options. So definitely the opposing value for the value data type, or the value variable, the opposing value will be false since the original value inside is true. For the op value, the opposing value will be true since the original values, and we can see that reflected in our result. So basically, we're going to look at empty values. So empty values, and basically the empty values are made up of the null value and undefined. These are just basically values, just spaces up containing values that are actually empty in the real sense of it. And I'll just show some case scenarios where we get the kind of undefined. Imagine I define a variable, I say let data. I've actually defined a variable, but I didn't assign any value into it. So imagine a situation where I console log data, and I enter the variable name, and I end it with my semicolon, and I save. So what is going to be displayed on a console? You can see the last word displayed here, undefined, and the data doesn't have any particular value, it's empty. And currently what is inside that space, which we are telling the console to show, is actually undefined. And then sometimes in particular we want to create a data type and specifically allocate a null value into it. So in this case I could simply say data equals null, and the null is a known keyword. You can see my IntelliSense has brought it out. It's a known keyword in JavaScript. So I've actually allocated null into the data variable, and then I'm now going to console.log it, console.log data, end it with a semicolon, save my work, reload the page, and we can see the null value I put into my data variable has now overridden the undefined, and we now know specifically we actually by ourselves put an empty value in there. And those two options show our particular null data type. And then lastly, for this session, we're going to look at object values. Object values. And for object values, it's a specialized data types in JavaScript, because they are different from all the types we've looked at before. The list we looked at before make up the primitive data types, whereas this object value kind of data type makes up what we call reference data types. And as we advance, maybe very much future in the forward in course, I will even break down the idea of primitive and reference values to us. But for now, we're just looking at all the basic data types, not necessarily categorizing them. So for object values, also we have the let keyword. We have we could just call it info. We could name this particular variable to hold our object data type info, and then I use my equal to. For the object data type, we define it with curly braces, an opening and a closing curly braces, and most times object data types usually have a value key pair. So we could have something like name, and then we have a colon to separate the key value pair, and here I could have a particular name. I could put it as a string also. Elemo Ulutola. Separate each content of the object with a comma. And next I could have age for this. I'll have a number, mind you, the data, some of the data here are fictitious, just on the lighter note. Then we could just add one more content for our object data type, and I could put sex. And male. Let's make that a string also. So you notice I have 3 contents in my object data type, 3 keys. The first key there is name, next key is age, next key is sex. The value for the name key is a string holding my name. The value for the age key, in this case, it's a number data type. You can see it's not a string, there are no quotes. And then the value for the third key, sex, is also a string male. So by so doing, I've created an object data type named info. So I'm gonna like save it. And then here I'm gonna console.log it. Let's see the output. Console.log, and inside there I'm just gonna put info and with a semicolon, save. And then when I reload my page, you could see the output: name Lamolutola, age 36, male. Okay, so the initial keys I put in string forms were actually put in the proper key form for object data types. Here they don't have to be actually strings like I initially did. And then we could see how an object data type looks like. So basically I've introduced to us the main data types we will be working with, will be very familiar with in the course of our JavaScript programming. In the next class, we will look at common operators and basic operator concepts popularly used in JavaScript to help us get so many logic and algorithms effected. So in the next session, we're going to look at JavaScript operators and operators concepts. Thank you for hanging on. It's quite a lengthy session. I wanted to be as short as possible, but we'll come to the end of it. See you in the next session. Thank you.